Hey guys, we are in day 134 in our Bible reading plan. Ruth, the entire book. We are now 13 books down and Psalm 133. The entire book of Ruth is 3 pages long, so we're making up for some lost time with some of the longer books. And what a story. Wow. I don't know if you've ever read it before. It reads like a love story, but it's so much more than just a love story between a man and a woman. It's the story of redemption and a provider. And so just to, maybe some of you might be familiar with this, but the story of Ruth tells the story of Naomi and her husband who leave Bethlehem to go to Moab. Not the wisest decision, spiritually speaking, because Moab was land that was worshiping of the of not the real God, and so it was considered a pagan land. And so for them to go there because there was a famine, in some ways was a practical decision, but maybe not the most spiritual decision. Well, it didn't take long for the tide to take its toll on the family of Naomi. Her husband dies and then her kids, leaving her with 2 widowed daughters. And she decides to go back home because she hears that God is providing food for her, the people of Israel again. And by the way, this is in the time of the Judges when things were really hard for the people of Israel. Remember, so this is not a spiritual environment that the people were living in. There was a lot of confusion in the land. People were doing what was right in their own eyes. Anyway, she makes it back home and the state of affairs in her heart is rotten. She's depressed and bitter and miserable. But along the way, she gives her daughter-in-laws a chance to leave her to go find husbands. And Ruth refuses to leave her. Ruth is the one who's the book is named after. So she stays with her. And there's this beautiful commitment of Ruth to the God of Naomi. She sees the true God. She wants him. And then in chapter 2, Naomi sort of sets her up to go to the field and get food, which turns into her meeting Boaz, who is going to be the redeemer in the story. And the picture of Boaz is a picture of Christ. And so follow with that in your mind. And so she gets the generosity of Boaz, eventually leads to the marriage. There is another kinsman redeemer, but Boaz sets up this state of affairs when Ruth tells him that she's willing to be his wife, and he sets it up to where he is her redeemer, and he marries her, and of course they have a child named Obed. And so that child ends up being the father of Jesse and the father of David. And so the story ends with this big wow moment of things turning around for Naomi, and we see her in the last verses of chapter 4 rejoicing in the Lord and his goodness, and all of the neighbors who had been watching her demise with interest now worshiping the Lord. One little tidbit that came to my attention, I started reading through Matthew this morning, honestly by God's providence, speaking of providence, and I was reminded again that Boaz was the son of Salmon and Rahab. Rahab, the Canaanite, who is from Jericho, who is a prostitute. That's Boaz for you. So as you read, think about that and why perhaps he had a compassion on a woman, Ruth, who was a Moabite, who's considered from another land, worshiping another god. And so imagine all of the racism potentially and feelings that could have been facing him, and yet he chose to love Ruth, and the result was that they had a baby who was the grandfather of David. This is the story of God and redemption. And so if you have your own story of redemption, think about it today. Who doesn't? And the big idea today, only God is able to turn your disappointment to delight when you turn to him in desperation. If you're feeling desperate, no place better to go than to the Lord. Praying for you today. Take care.